Welcome to Highland Cottage Books. I'm Martha, and this is Highland Cottage. And today we're going to talk about 3 horror books and 2 thrillers. I made coffee and tea. I think there's some grape soda in the fridge if that's what you're interested in. Have a seat on the couch and let's talk books. The first book that I'd like to talk about is The Remaking by Clay McLeod Chapman. In this story, we focus on a schlocky 1970s movie, it's a horror movie, that was filmed in a town with a dark past, and the movie is supposedly based on true events. By all accounts, the movie is artistically terrible, but it has developed a bit of a cult following over the decades, in part because of some mysterious events that happened during its filming and kind of the legends that have sprung up around it. Years later, because Hollywood is going to Hollywood, they decide a couple bucks can be made and they're ready for a remake. They decide to do a bit of stunt casting and pull in one of the child actors from the film to play another part now that she's all grown up. This book is a great story. It is easy to read, but it is also very complex and interesting and has a surprising amount of depth given its topic. And there are a couple things I love about it. One, we go through the audition process with the child actor in the 70s, and that is about as scary as any of the other parts of the book. The way that she's exploited by the people around her, her parents, the filmmakers, all of that. And then later on, we see her at a horror convention now as the celebrity, and everybody kind of wants a piece of her because she's famous. And I've actually spent a lot of time at conventions. I have a side business where I make craft items, candles, bags, that sort of thing. And I have for about 10 years gone to science fiction conventions and horror conventions to sell my wares. And so I'm very familiar with the world, and I think that Chapman completely nails it. I assume he's been there as an author and knows of what he speaks. I love this book, and in the past few weeks, I keep going back to certain moments of it and replaying them in my mind and being really impressed by the way Chapman put everything together. I also, while I was listening to it, I was reading it and listening to it, which kind of happens sometimes when I get an audiobook and I realized, oh no, I don't want to stop consuming this, so I better start reading it. I wanted, when I first started listening to it, the opening section of it is from the point of view of a person in that town telling you the history of some dark events that happened in the 1920s, 1930s. There's some very dark things, and it's told almost like a campfire story. You know, gather around and hear the sad tale of woe. And I loved the narration so much that I put a little mental note in my brain, and I said, you know, when I do this video, I should absolutely shout out the narrator, because when you have a good narrator doing a story, you can elevate it exponentially. And when you have a bad narrator, even if it's a good story, it can just ruin the whole experience. So I just wanted to shout out the narrator. So right before I made this video, I looked up to see, oh, who was that? And guess who it was? It was Clay McLeod Chapman. So, Mr. Chapman, I have a few things to say to you. First of all, you have a super cool name. Second, you wrote an amazing book. And third, you're an actor as well? Well, fuck you. And well done. Please stop bogarting all the talent. Anyway, you should read this book. It's great. The next book is Bad Movie Night. I was on a bit of a cursed movie kick It's one of my favorite tropes, and actually, if you have any suggestions for me, please leave them in the comments below. I've read Night Film, Experimental Film, Episode 13, Head Full of Ghosts, and House of Leaves, which I kind of consider a cursed movie as well. Anyway, Bad Movie Night is a popcorn thriller. Actually, a popcorn horror book. It's not going to rearrange your DNA or anything. It won't change your life, but it absolutely is a lot of fun. It's about 120 pages, and you can finish it, and probably will finish it in an evening or two. Because it's super fast paced and it's very exciting, and it reminds me a lot of a Twilight Zone episode. Not a particular Twilight, like not a specific one, but in general, it kind of has that twisty feel to it, which I personally love. In the story, we follow a bunch of YouTubers who have a reaction channel. What they do is they watch bad movies, and they, have a couple beers, and then they crack jokes while they're watching it, and then they get lots of views, and that's what they do for a living. And there's this one movie called Creepies, which nobody can seem to like get their hands on, but apparently it's this legendary, bad, scary movie, and might be a little bit cursed. But curses aren't real. So they one day they get their hands on a copy and they watch it, and it goes great for them, and that's the end of the book, and they're super happy, and they get lots of views, and everyone has a wonderful life forevermore. Or they watch it and they really, really regret that decision. It was definitely a mood. It reminded me also a little bit of, I guess, Channel Zero. It had a little bit of that feel to it as well, if you've ever seen those. And if you haven't seen those, watch No End House, because it's great. It had, it was just spooky and ethereal and had a mood to it, and was pretty scary, but more in like a creepy way. There weren't a lot of jump scares. That having been said, I wasn't going to be reading it with the lights off, I'll say that. But this was a 3-star read for me, but like a good 3-star, not like, meh. It was more like, woo, 3-star, in that it wasn't high literature, but it was absolutely a lot of fun, and I do recommend it. The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell tells the story of Mrs. Bainbridge, whose life was first charmed and now has taken a turn for the worse. It is in the 1800s in England, and she's a newlywed whose husband is across the country fixing up his ancestral home to get it ready for her and any potential children they might have. And she gets word one day that instead of the home being ready, actually her husband has passed away. So now she has to travel and go to his funeral instead of the wonderful homecoming that she was hoping for. And she also knows that she's actually pregnant with the heir of this estate. And she never got to tell him this. So she tries to make the best of it, but she arrives and the estate isn't very nice. It's completely decrepit. He didn't have time to fix it up, and it actually hasn't been lived in for a generation. The servants aren't very nice, and the local townsfolk are downright hostile. In fact, nobody in the local town will work in the house because they feel that there's something off about it, and nobody wants to risk their lives or their happiness by spending any more time on the estate than they have to. Mrs. Bainbridge is trying to do the best that she can. She hears some weird noises at night, and she goes and she investigates, and she finds a cat who is making the noise. But while she's up there, she sees silent companions, and these are real things. They're also called dummy boards. They were a fad in the 1600s in the Netherlands. People would paint sort of wooden boards, actually very much like my friend Snickers back here. People would paint realistic images of people and sometimes animals on boards and kind of set them out to fool people into believing that they were real. They might make little tableaus or put them around their parties. It was a big fun thing apparently in the 1600s to do. But as you might imagine, it's also a little creepy. So anyway, she sees them and she's like, huh, those are weird. But then she notices one that looks a little bit like she did when she was a little girl. So now her guard is up. That is where I'm going to leave the story to tease it for you. I will say that there are some people who describe this as one of the scariest books they've ever read. I personally didn't have that experience. It's not something, the story isn't the type of story that scares me. However, or at least doesn't scare me that much. However, I will say that while I was reading it at one point, I was hungry. So I came downstairs to get a snack, and I came down in the dark. And while I was getting my snack, I decided that, oh no. I decided to turn on all the lights and leave them blazing from the fridge to my bed because I did not want to make that journey in the dark. While this book does have some supernatural elements to it, a lot of the terror comes from, and the horror certainly, comes from being a woman in a society that doesn't value, respect you, or listen to you and believe you when you believe that things are a bit off. Sometimes I Lie by Alice Feeney is now officially my third favorite Alice Feeney book, which is high praise. I like all of Alice Feeney's books. It is Beautiful Ugly, I think, Rock, Paper, Scissors, and then Sometimes I Lie, and then, Daisy Darker, and His and Hers, etc., etc. Anyway, Sometimes I Lie is about a woman who is in a coma, and she can hear what's going on around her, but she can't move. She can't sit up, and people don't realize that she can hear what's going on around her. And she's trying to figure out how she got there. Her husband's coming in, her sister's coming into the room sometimes. There are doctors, nurses, other hospital people, and she's just trying to piece together how she got there. And it is interesting because we know that maybe something untoward has happened, and there are several candidates of who could be a bad actor in this story. Plus, she is also, as it says on the tin, an unreliable narrator. So there's all sorts of twists and turns and shenanigans that are happening. I can't really say any more. The less you know, the better it is. But this was Feeney's debut novel, I believe, and she came out of the gate with a triumph, I feel. And you will not be disappointed in this book. Look in the Mirror by Catherine Steadman was my favorite thriller on this list. In it, a Cambridge professor is reeling after the death of her father. He was respected and famous and well-regarded and a good father to her as well, so she's completely at a loss. She's going through his papers when she gets an email from his lawyer saying that she's actually inherited an estate in the British Virgin Islands. This is news to her. She had no idea that her dad owned any property outside of England, and so she's very confused. They're wealthy, but this estate seems luxurious and wildly beyond his means. So she's very confused, so she has to go check it out, obviously. And I can't tell you anything more except she gets there and there's a room in the basement that's locked. and she can't seem to get into it, and nobody seems to have the keys. So that's all I can tell you. But I desperately want to tell you more and tell you exactly why I love this book, but there are layers upon layers, and just when you think you know what's going on, there's more layers for you to discover, and it's very smart and very clever, and the situation is diabolical. I'm just going to keep gushing because I can't tell you anything more about the plot without spoiling anything. The less you know, the better it is. And even when you think you know things, you don't know anything at all. So it is wonderful. Absolutely pick this up. Run, get it, get it. So that's my list for this week. Next week, my friend, Mr. Chapman has inspired me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a list of audiobooks that are made even better by their narrators. I'll see you then. Bye.